Well, hey there, idiots. Welcome back to Observe. In today's video, we're going to be analyzing the nonverbal communication of Natalia Grace and Michael Barnett. Again, this is the second sit-down discussion between the two of them, and some things have certainly changed. More on that in just a second. Let's go ahead and roll the intro first. Today's video is sponsored by our friends over at Scentbird, the fragrance subscription that lets you explore a world of designer scents without breaking your bank account. With Scentbird, you can choose a new designer fragrance to try every single month, all for just $17. There's no need to invest a fortune into high-end scents when you can have a premium experience at an affordable price. They offer over 600 perfumes and colognes, including big names like Gucci and Prada, as well as indie labels like Skylar and Heretic. You're not getting just a fragrance, however, you're getting a curated experience. Now, many of you know that I was born without the ability to smell, called congenital anosmia. I have never been able to and never will be able to smell a singular thing in my life, at least with what science can do right now. That being said, everyone around me can obviously still smell, and what I'm usually worried about is that they can smell me, and not in a good way. Fortunately for me, Scentbird has unintentionally provided a way for people like me to be able to still rest assured that they can get quality scents just from the description alone. Every month you get to pick out exactly what you want to receive, so there are no big surprises for you, and their flexible subscription plans allow you to skip or cancel anytime, making it a hassle-free experience all the way around. To even further test the descriptions of the fragrances, I had my business partner, who has been an avid Scentbird subscriber for years and can, in fact, smell, help me pick out some scents that would work for me. We chose Oula Rouge Exclusive from Christian Siriano, which contains notes of cassis, bergamot, saffron, sheer jasmine, and boya wood. Spirit from Malo, which consists of ambroxan, violet, musk, and black pepper. And lastly, Brioni from Eau de Parfum Essentiel, which is characterized by its notes of tonka bean, bergamot, cardamom, patchouli, and frankincense. Each fragrance comes with a 30-day supply, allowing you to truly experience the scent before committing to a full-size bottle. And trust me, some of these full-size bottles can cost over $150, even all the way up to $300 to $500. While all the scents we selected were apparently rather delightful, the one that seemed to match me most as a person was Brioni. The rich notes of the fragrance provided the warm and natural vibes that I felt suited me most. So, if you would like to be able to see what I will be smelling like day to day, consider adding Brioni to your next order, and this is actually where it gets good for you. If you use my coupon code, which is OBSERVE55, you will get an exclusive 55% off at Scentbird, which comes to just a little over $7 for your first month, which is a steal. Again, check out the links below, and don't forget to use my code, again, that's OBSERVE55, for that incredible discount, and start your fragrance journey today. Thanks again to Scentbird for sponsoring this video, and back to your regularly scheduled programming. So for those of you who do not know, I have already done a couple of videos on this case before. Go and check those out before watching this one if you want a little bit more context as to this interaction here. As I said just a second ago, this interaction has a lot of different dynamic to it than the one that we watched just recently. I feel like this one was a lot more productive and a lot more revealing as to the actual dynamics between the two being Michael Barnett and Natalia Grace. That's all that I'm going to go ahead and say before actually starting into the video. It speaks for itself. Let's keep watching. Before we dive into it, though, I will also note, again, I had to do some editing to the audio to try to get it past copyright, remove all that background music, and also try to strip it back down to just clean, normal vocals, so you'll hear some weird audio artifacting here and there. Anyways, let's go ahead and dive in. All right. I'm going to go ahead and pause here. So there's a number of things that are obviously sticking out. First, it seems as though the situation itself has changed, where now Natalia's waiting, Michael gets to show up, and the door is still oddly open. So we're already seeing that there's some patterns that we're seeing editing and setup wise, letting us know that that prior instance might have been heavily orchestrated by the producers. If this instance looks very similar, just the flip coin, it does make sense. Also, you will notice that there are a lot of areas of dead space in here. So during those times of dead space, even though it's awkward to listen to and perhaps perceive, there are some things that we might be able to pick up non-verbally during those dead spaces. So just wanted to make note of this interesting change in dynamic as to how this interaction is being set up. Also, I want to make note, this is part one of this interaction. It's a fairly long interaction, and I've split it into two fairly equal parts. So hit like and subscribe and everything if you would like to see the second half of this as well. Let's go ahead and continue back in here.
So where were we? Where do you want to start?
We could start from where you left off.
I believe the question we were on was, why didn't I leave Christine? It's difficult.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and pause and make a note of the energy between the two different people here. So Michael, we're still seeing the same sort of consistent energy. He's not irate like he was in the last video, obviously. There's been times, so that makes sense. Natalia is what is more striking to me. She's no longer egged on by this angry sort of emotion that she was in the earlier one. She seems to be much more present and in control of her own emotional state while sitting down in this. That's encouraging for me to be able to see, because it lets me know that there will likely not be as many of these emotionally driven questions that could be difficult for some people to be able to answer or interact with depending on their background. So I'm already seeing something that seems to be a little bit more in control from Natalia. That feels good. I'm already still feeling a little bit of that performatism from Michael. That's to be expected. Let's keep watching.
It's difficult to understand, but after 15 plus years of being put down and degraded and controlled and threatened, I didn't have any strength at all to stand up to her. I wish I did. I didn't. You ever seen the movie Monsters, Inc.?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and pause here. So during that time, Michael has a consistent pulling off to the side of his mouth there. It's not a partial smile, so it's not contempt. And that pulling off to the side of the mouth can be an indicator of perhaps some insecurity or insincerity in what's being said there. Along with that, we're seeing a number of lip compressions in there. We're seeing activity around the nose. We're seeing mouth shrugs, and all of this is bubbling up all at the same time. However, it is also extremely overt. None of these are very subtle expressions that are crossing his face, which lets me know that on some level he's trying to portray these. Now, we're still going to be able to keep our eye out for any of these areas of incongruencies, especially in storyline, prior storylines, anything along those lines, so this is still going to be very revealing. That being said, let's go ahead and continue forward here. It sounds as if Michael's going to start talking in this interesting... You'll see.
Think.
Yes.
You know, the same monster goes through bunches of doors, and all these kids around the world have the same monster, but they don't know it. We have the same monster, and we didn't know it for years. Everybody that knows me.
I'm going to go ahead and pause here. So this strikes me as interesting, even possibly from the editing standpoint, because we're seeing Natalia just kind of listen and take in information from Michael during this time. There's not a lot of emotion flickering across her face. We're not seeing the same anger or aggression or annoyance or dismissal that we saw in the prior interaction between them. We're just seeing this intent, I'm listening as you're talking. Meanwhile, Michael's going through this fairly theatrical and childish example of relating this very real, tangible, and serious instance to Monsters, Inc., which I don't appreciate that relation done by Michael there. It downplays the severity of the actual situation and also kind of pushes me to believe that this is still a play act from him. This is all fascinating to make note of, but then along with that, right after he says part of this, it hard cuts back to Natalia and she seems to be overtaken with emotion. Now, the emotion, I don't get to see that onset of the emotion. Perhaps it had a natural onset. There is an emotional profile for those of you who don't know, and it commonly follows an onset. Now, perhaps that onset happened during the part where it's showing Michael's face, something along those lines. However, I don't get to see that, so what we're seeing is a fairly collected and calm Natalia, hard crash to her, and now she's showing this emotion, which seems to be genuine, even down to the glistening of tears in her eyes, but we're not seeing that onset, so I'm curious to know, is this the editing? This simply doesn't line up. It doesn't seem to line up with what Michael's saying either. Perhaps we're supposed to infer that Natalia is feeling this overwhelming emotion from this little blip that Michael is saying about her and him experiencing the same monster. Again, this is problematic behavior coming from Michael because he's comparing two very different traumas and trying to lump them together for his own sake of victimhood. He doesn't want to be perceived as at fault on any level, so he's trying to lump it together with Natalia, who is the victim in this story. So we're already seeing these problematic behaviors come out from Michael, and during this interview, this interaction, this dialogue, I believe we get to see a little bit more truthfully Natalia's side as opposed to Michael Barnett's side. And it's not what we saw in the last one, so let's keep watching.
We don't call her by Christine. Matter of fact, I hate the word. I don't like the word. I don't like hearing the word. Her name's Evil. Every now and then I'll call her the Wicked Witch of the South, but no, it's okay. A little levity's all right. But she's earned it.
What do you know that Christine did to me?
I know some things.
All right, so pausing it here again, we're hearing Michael now try to do another rapport building with a little bit of a joke, which does actually land on Natalia some. So that moment of rapport building has been a success for Michael. They're now on the same page a little bit more. So this lets us know that Michael is in control of what he's presenting, and he does have an agenda of wanting to be able to win Natalia over. So we've already seen him try to orchestrate this idea again of him being in the same victim group as her, not the case. And we're seeing this rapport building attempt already coming in with some success, which is another low-level point of manipulation. Now we're going to be able to hear Natalia start to ask some of these important, heavy-hitting questions in a non-accusatory way, in a way that is not problematic, which I, again, have to give enormous kudos to Natalia, especially considering the context of the case itself. So she's going to begin asking these questions, and I do feel that Michael's response to these is fairly telling. So let's watch.
Other things I just learned. And then this is going to sound silly. I'm afraid of what I don't know. Like, I know a little. I don't know a lot.
What do you know?
It's a very long answer. I mean, that could take us a week.
Just the highlights.
Oh, golly.
Okay. So we're hearing Natalia be insistent on this. Just like, come on, give me a little bit, Michael. And Michael is going to start doing something that he does throughout the entirety of this interaction. He starts dodging questions as much as possible and hiding it behind any form of display that he can. So in some areas he says, oh, well, I know some, but not much. I know this, but not that. And he never answers the question. He answers the question by saying, I know some things. So Natalia sees through that, and she continues to push harder at it. And again, in certain areas, we're starting to see Natalia flash a little bit of scorn in regards to Michael's responses here. This is not something that is characterizing her entire interaction, though, however, so we can see that she's feeling this, but she maintains composure and control. while asking the next question. Again, huge kudos to Natalia on this front. Not so great on Michael Barnett's side of things. Let's continue watching.
I'm so afraid of the things I don't know about. And I don't want to know the things I don't know about because I know they're all terrible. And I'd rather just not know.
Again, now we're hearing Michael start to try to put on another performance and to shift the question of what did you know about the terrible things done to me, Natalia, to I don't want to know about the things that were done. I'm not actually going to answer the question that was asked. I'm going to answer it with a way, with a method that inspires you to pity me. I'm going to say, I don't want to know. I don't want to know that such bad things can happen. However, even earlier, just a second ago, he said the answer to this question was going to be extensively long. So we heard him say he doesn't know much, that the answer would take a long time, and now he's afraid to know because he doesn't want to realize that there are such terrible things in the world. So we're seeing this flip back and forth from Michael. Now, as he's starting to do this last little display that we see here of the please pity me, we're hearing some forced emotion come into his voice. We're seeing some manipulators in various ways. Agitation is coming out as he's starting to shift his posture around. We're not able to fully see his face, so I'm not able to see if in some of these more physiological responses like inflammation and tears coming to the eyes, I'm not able to see those as clearly on his face to be able to hopefully add some authenticity to this emotional display. Nevertheless, what I'm left with is still this taste of performatism coming from Michael during this. And Natalia's response to that is to have some agitation come out again. She breaks eye contact, looks off to the side. That could be dismissal. Still seeing a little bit of the scorn coming in with the narrowing of the eyes. We're also seeing her start to lick her lips as well in agitation. And all of these seem to be an indicator of perhaps a low level of frustration in regards to Michael continuing his antics as he always has. Let's continue watching this as it continues to play out.
That there's such horrible things in the world. But life doesn't give us those opportunities. The only chance I have at an okay future, and maybe you've got a little of this in there too. If all of us, if everyone just stands up and says, this is what happened, this is what she did. If we do it all at the same time, she can't scream and lie her way out of it.
I'm going to go ahead and pause here. Now I've been able to kind of see what Michael Barnett's face looks like during this time of intense emotion, as you can hear him really trying to push that into his vocal cords. However, if we're looking across the face, we're seeing points of desynchronization as the lower half of his face, displaying lip compressions and frowns, is not matching the upper half of his face. His eyebrows are showing some of the activity, especially in the glabella area, which is very easy to control. What he's not able to control are the tears and the inflammation, and neither of those two are existent in his face, letting me know that at least on some level, this display that we're seeing is fake. It's forced. It's not fully synchronized, and that means that it's not fully authentic. So we're hearing Michael again in a point of manipulation. And something else that is fascinating to me in this and fairly telling as far as the detail goes is that Michael is right now, and in the prior interaction, each time he is trying to paint himself out to be fully and completely pure. He didn't do anything wrong. He was the victim too, so it wasn't his fault. He did nothing wrong. He was not an adult in the situation. He was not in any form of control, so he did absolutely nothing wrong. And again, in most every situation, a person who claims that they are completely innocent in a situation is likely lying. That's not always the case, but it is something to be able to make note of, even just statistically speaking, to pay attention to. Perhaps that adds some context. And considering Michael's displays during this, I feel like it adds very valuable context. Nevertheless, let's just keep watching.
She has screamed and screamed and screamed horrific, horrific, horrific lies.
What was the conversation About dropping me off in the apartment. What was that conversation?
Westfield or Lafayette?
We'll start with Westfield.
All right, want to make note of Natalia's nonverbal communication during this because it's what would be considered synchronized. We're seeing actual flashes of sadness, perhaps grief, pain. We're seeing the trembling of the lower lip. We're seeing the lip compressions and the frown coming in there. We're seeing fighting back of tears and action in the glabella, and all of it synchronized. It's not something that feels as though it's being put on display. It feels as though it's actually trying to escape and being wrestled down. So that pushes me towards authenticity. And that's a very different energy than what Michael gives off with his. His seems to be, I want the emotional side of things to be the thing that you focus on. That might be because the factual side of things doesn't support his story as well, so he has to have something that will. So we're seeing that kind of flip side of coin comparison here between Michael and Natalia, and I find it very fascinating and just so much more telling than what we saw in the prior interaction. Let's keep watching.
Again, conversation.
Just what happened?
You have to understand there's not a lot of conversation. There's a lot of dictating.
Did you know that she was getting me an ID?
Yes, I did. At that point in time, legally, your age had been altered by the state. You, like anybody else, need to have an ID.
Interesting. So again, on Natalia's face, we're also possibly seeing some disgust coming in with the corners of her nose, having some activation in there that could also just be related to fighting back the tears. And they're not necessarily excluding each other out. Those both can exist at the same time, and in fact, they would both make sense contextually, just something to make note of. Now, she's still asking this question, and Michael actually responds with something that would be fairly implicative of him at first, but then immediately he falls back into this, I am a perfectly white knight in this situation because my bad behavior was inspired or instructed by somebody else. Again, not his fault, somebody else's fault. He just kind of went along with it. And during this time, the biggest issue that I'm finding with Michael Barnett is that he seems to be, at very least, very happily complacent and very terrible behavior around him. He doesn't want to take a stand up to that because he's afraid of the possible repercussions, perhaps conflict, something along those lines. So we're really understanding the power play between the two here. Let's keep watching.
Okay, let's step back. And whose idea was it?
Was what?
With the age change.
I did tell all these guys we're not getting into that subject.
Why can't you say?
Did you guys know?
Yes.
How are these parameters? You know me. Not a good idea. Just one second there. I just want to stay away from things.
Pausing again, so we're having something that would be obviously a fairly implicative and intense interaction, intense question, requiring an intense answer. And as soon as that power play comes out, that would set a little bit more power into the possession of Natalia, we see Michael pull another one of his same stunts that he has in the past, which is to angrily get up and storm off. And this time, he seems to be a little bit more in control, but again, he's still trying to remove himself, and that takes the control back by simply removing himself of the situation, not because he's building a boundary around himself, but because he's trying to avoid another conflicting or perhaps implicative storyline here. So we're seeing this power play come back out again. Michael's really being overtly manipulative throughout this, and I'm not seeing it from Natalia's side this time. I'm not seeing her try to lord her religion. I'm not seeing her try to enforce any exterior rules. I'm not seeing her try to manipulate with her emotional state. However, on the flip side, I'm seeing Michael do everything that he did in the prior one, letting me know that Natalia was likely heavily coached in the first one and heavily influenced by the people around her, and Michael was more in control of his own emotional display and storyline on that front. So we're understanding a lot more about the interaction between the two. Let's keep watching.
I want to stay away from things that might be too emotionally
But you know what, though?
touchy, that's all.
Okay, we're gonna step away from that because I got a lot of questions. Okay.
So that has a lot of dismissal from Natalia. We're seeing a raising of the one side of her eyebrow. We're hearing a little bit of a sarcastic tone enter into her words as well. And that makes sense that this is frustrating for her and that she wants to let loose a little bit of perhaps passive-aggressive aggression at Michael because of his weaseliness in regards to this question, a fairly important question for Natalia's side. So we're understanding that. We are still seeing that perhaps Natalia does have some emotionally driven points to this, and that does make sense. And she has the right to have emotionally driven points to this. This is a very difficult interaction for her. Michael Barnett had the opportunity to step in. And yes, he has his own traumas and his own reasons for not doing that. Nevertheless, that doesn't excuse that he was an adult in this situation and she was a child in this situation. So there is still a level of responsibility that's different between the two of them. They're not on equal playing fields here, even if just by plain age and life experience alone. So we're seeing some emotional display coming from Natalia, but it's not ruling her. And that's very good to be able to see. Let's keep watching.
Why not just put me up for adoption again?
Unfortunately, the real answer for that lies in Evil's head. I can make a couple assumptions that are pretty good ones. During that time, after Florida and before the Chaconies released you, that 6-month period where something was wrong. Something was off. During that time, I had a conversation with the monster about, look, things aren't working right. Maybe this is no harm, no foul. We don't have to do anything because you legally were still theirs. Maybe we just walk away from this and cool our jets. And that was met with a very, 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 very stern no. The deeper one.
Gonna go ahead and pause here. There are a number of things that are obviously interesting. And for those of you who have been on the channel, you've probably picked up on a number of these as we're watching through them as well. Not the least of which is at the end, the very. The number of varies. He repeats that word very many times. Very, 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 very many times. And that verbatim repetition is interesting to me. It's not natural, and that lets me know that he's really trying to force this point. He's really trying to push this point. There's a compensation that's happening there. Why is the compensation happening? So that's coming out there as well. And then he's also done this thing that's interesting verbally. He's fully villainized Christine now. He's given a reason to it. He's like, I don't like to use the name Christine, so I use evil. He also uses monster, so he's fully villainized one person. But he has not also termed himself, who he was another adult in this situation, with any other villainous terms. And that lets us know that, again, he's trying to paint everything out to be exclusively Christina's fault. And he had nothing, no power, no control, no ability to do anything during that time, which is difficult for the child in the situation to be able to understand or feel, and arguably it's difficult for the general public to be able to buy as well. And we're seeing these areas of manipulation from Michael, so it lets everybody start to feel this feeling of suspicion in regards to Michael's behavior and his actual influence in the various situations. Let's keep watching.
The deeper why. And this is all assumption and allegedly. So make sure you guys are putting the word allegedly over this, like in flashing letters, right? She saw the adoption, especially the adoption of somebody with special needs, as a societal thing. The one thing we can always count on is Evil sure does love her some attention. And some cameras, and some eyes on her, and people...
To go ahead and pause here. So as Michael's saying these atrocious things that may have been the processing behind Christina's actions, we're seeing surprise, perhaps disbelief come into Natalia's face as the lowering of the jaw comes in here. We're also seeing her eyebrows come together, and the glabella area is having some activity, and we're seeing a little bit of narrowing of the eyes, perhaps some action in the corners of her nose, and all of these have very distinctive emotional reasonings behind them, and they all make sense contextually as to what Michael's describing. And then again, he starts to say that Evil, again, villainizing Christina, likes ... And what I find fascinating is that the things that he lists are things that he too seems to deeply appreciate. Likes to have the cameras on him, likes to have the drama around him, likes to have the control, likes to have the attention, but in a very different way. And so I'm finding this all very fascinating. And again, throughout this, I am very appreciative of how well Natalia is handling it. Very interesting. Let's keep watching.
And people worshiping her. She wrote out a full one-page piece of paper once, explaining to me why she qualifies for sainthood based on the 2 miracles she's performed. That's who we're dealing with. So when you're dealing with that level of narcissists, it's...
Michael's getting more and more excited while he's talking about this. He feels like he's able to have some grounds for dumping more responsibility onto Christine, and you're starting to see gravity-defying gestures come out across his entire body. His feet are moving, his posture is moving, he's leaning forward in excitement and anticipation. We're seeing broader gestures coming out. He's seeming more fluid as all of the attention is being shifted, as he perceives it, over to how terrible Christine is. And that's a fascinating thing from Michael, because that's a point of manipulation that he has carried, as we've seen throughout this entirety, not only of this interaction, but of the one before. Anything that he can do to shift suspicion and responsibility from himself onto somebody else, he is doing. And right now he feels like he's succeeding, and it's showing non-verbally. So let's keep watching.
It's vaguely possible that she saw the adoption as aren't I a great person, everyone? Look at me. Hey, neighbors. Look, I'm so wonderful. I'm so wonderful. I'm so charitable. She compared herself to Oprah regularly. She was going to be the Oprah for autistic kids. I've heard this so many times. So my assumption is the reason that she wouldn't undo where we were. All those people that were, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me. Aren't I great? Aren't I great? Aren't I great? Wait, what do you mean? Where's my newly adopted daughter? Oh, hell, I gotta explain this.
Did she tell you why she took me out of school?
She did. I was told that you were a danger to the other students, that you were ramming your wheelchair into them on purpose, that you had taken your parking brake off the wheelchair and hit it, blah, blah. We don't need to get into this. This is rough stuff.
I'm going to go ahead and pause here. Now, what I find interesting about Michael's response, obviously he plays out the rest of the answer. Now we're on to this next question here, and his immediate response is to take a drink of water. His mouth is dry, perhaps his throat is dry. That could be because he's been talking, could be because this question inspires some nerves. Now, what strikes me as interesting in this is his nonverbal behavior right after the sip of water. He starts to close back in, he folds his hands into the middle of his legs here, and he starts to sit small again. Now, this subordinate behavior that he's displaying is something that he showed in the prior times when he was really trying to gain some victimhood status from the people around him. It was a manipulation point last time. During this time, I find it interesting that he's shifted from very broad, comfortable, fluid motion down to this very small frame that's fairly stiff and not at all fluid. And that change in his nonverbal behavior strikes me as interesting. It's a red flag to me. And it makes me wonder if this narrative that he's responding here, if this telling that he understood is actually what took place, or if perhaps there was something else that was said, that he knew something else, that the interaction went a different way, and it's being reflected by his nonverbal communication. That part I wouldn't throw too far beyond him, but at this point there's not enough to be able to say in this specific interaction to say that. If you do watch the rest of the documentary, there is a lot more information that goes along with this and coincides with this, that you should be able to gather some of this extra information. But as with what we're working with here, we just have to keep watching. There's only a little bit left here.
This is rough stuff. She told me that she was protecting the other first grade children by removing you from the class.
What I remember is Christine telling me that she was getting a phone.
But that little last part there where Michael's talking, he has a very substantial eye-blocking gesture and a manipulator next to his eye as well. Perhaps he has something in his eye, but it does not urge me to believe his authenticity during this time. To have that level of an eye-blocking gesture with the manipulator on his face, showing agitation, perhaps a desire to separate oneself from what the negative situation that's being said is, in this case, possible bending of the truth. There are a number of nonverbal tells in there that just raise a red flag for me. So that I find fascinating. Natalia is going to continue forward here. Let's just watch this interaction, and then we'll talk about it at the end.
Phone call at 9 o'clock every single day.
I couldn't say whether she was or wasn't getting a phone call every day. From my end of things, She never told me she was getting a phone call every day.
My teacher said that she never had to call Christine. That I didn't do what Christine was claiming that I did. Nothing.
Nobody did any of the things she accused everyone of doing.
Okay, and we're going to go ahead and stop here because it's a decent spot in the actual narrative to stop. And Michael does something interesting verbally here at the end, as he now tries to lump everything that Christine ever said into a group of lying. And that's simply not actually almost ever the case. Even if a person is a very regular liar, if they're a good one, it will be mixed in with truth. So this statement that everything that Christine ever said about anyone else is a lie, just take it as a lie, that is Michael covering likely his own butt. Because if he can convince everyone that everything that Christine says is a lie, then that means that anything that Christine has said or has directed towards Michael is likely a lie. That's another manipulation point coming out from Michael on this. So on this first half of this interaction, we're seeing a very clear structure for the power play between the two of them. No longer is Natalia being egged on by external forces to be angry or confrontational or problematic. She's simply approaching it with questions that she has the right to know. She's not being led by her emotions. She's not trying to be manipulative with what she's presenting. We're seeing some interesting choices with editing in there as well, so that does raise some questions for what we're able to see as far as its authenticity. Now, on the other side of things, we're seeing the exact same thing from Michael that we have every other time that we've watched him. He's very performative. He does everything dialed up to 11. If he's trying to present that he's sad, he wants everyone to see and feel and hear how sad he is. If he's feeling defensive, you can see it. If he feels like he's losing control, he likes to step out. Everything from him is theatrics. And to me, that level of theatrics, that level of blame shifting, to me seems far, far more suspicious than it does clearing his name. And non-verbally speaking, we've been able to see a number of these manipulative tactics come out from him, and some of these non-verbal seepages around areas that seem to be suspicious verbally. So I will leave that to you in the comments of this video to what you feel you saw during this. I've given you the things that I've been able to see and pick up on during this, and my reasonings for what I feel. Let me know yours if I've missed something, or if you would just simply like to see the other half of this. I will likely be doing it, but I always do like to be able to see if it's something that you like or not. So let me know in the comments below. Like this video if you want to be able to come back or see it come back in. Subscribe and hit the bell, that will let you know. If you do want to be able to become something like a member to support the channel a little bit more, then you can do that. If it's one tier, you get some smaller benefits from it, but it's really just a thank you to the people here over at Observe that make these videos happen. So if you would like to be able to do that, please feel free to do so. Thank you again to Scentbird for sponsoring this video. I do highly suggest their subscription. They are a fantastic service, and I think I smell great. So let me know your chosen scent, or if you decided to go with the one that I decided at the beginning of this video, and if you like it or not. But without further ado, that's all that I've got for the day. My name is Logan, and you have been oh so awesome, as you always are, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.